you want to know what a broken education system actually looks like, after 30 years engineering enterprises, software infrastructures, and running massive teams across corporate IT, Vice President Chris Roberts walked away from an executive suite.
Some that were Afghan refugees, where the Taliban didn't even allow them to be educated. I remember losing sleep. Even the word factor or basic multiplication, as you had mentioned, escaped them. CPS or the Child Protective Services would have been there without question. I was going to have to do this on my own. Education would be the way out of that situation. What is math education about? It's about thinking. It's not about the computation. It's about thinking that need education to get out of their situation.
Before we dive into today's episode, I have a quick favor to ask you. If you enjoy the show, it would mean the absolute world to me if you could take 5 seconds to head over to our YouTube and hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and let us bring even better content. All right, let's get into it. If you want to know what a broken education system actually looks like, you don't look at policy papers or standardized test scores. You look at the 10th grade classroom where 16-year-old kids are staring down an algebra problem, completely paralyzed. They aren't paralyzed because they lack the intelligence to balance an equation. They're paralyzed because their brains are working so desperately to figure out what 7 times 8 is that they run completely out of cognitive bandwidth before they can even touch the variable. They hit an invisible wall built entirely out of a missing fundamental piece. Last year, after 30 years engineering enterprises, software infrastructures, and running massive teams across corporate IT, Vice President Chris Roberts walked away from an executive suite, stepped straight back into a public high school classroom, and inherited 120 of those exact teenagers. Chris, take me to the exact moment in that classroom last year when you looked at that 10th grade completely defeated by an equation and realized that your decades of enterprise technology leadership weren't a past career, but a weapon you had to build and tear down that math wall for good. What did you see in their eyes that made them go back to that corporate comfort of impossible?
I remember that as vividly as you painted it, and was losing sleep about how to introduce and lesson plan for solving quadratics by factoring when I just had reviewed factoring in and of itself, and I could ask them what is 4x minus 28, and if you have some number sense about you, you see that 4 and that 7 in that 28, and you have an idea of what to do. But I had students that hadn't had the most successful time in Algebra 1. They didn't have a good math relationship and didn't have the intrinsic motivation you would hope in your greatest optimism. And I could ask them, what are factors of 21 that add to 10? And I got blank stares and an occasional blink, but there were such a diverse set of students in there. There are some that were honest Afghan refugees, where the Taliban didn't even allow them to be educated. And so I was having to, in my teacher heart, really figure out how to do this. I had good support from my administration. They said, hey, do what you need to do. And I did go back and actually drill some multiplication facts and times tables because we have to meet them where they are. And I then had the idea for what followed. But I remember losing sleep because even the word factor or basic multiplication, as you had mentioned, escaped them. And it was a little frustrating, but at the same time, that's what I was there for.
Now, it's like the ultimate intersection of technical brilliance, pedagogical mastery, and a relentless refusal to let a single child be locked out of their own future. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are so that the audience can understand the context of where this conversation's going?
Well, as you mentioned, the 30 years of IT, that in itself isn't a straight line because I went to school, college back in 1986, which might date me, but that's fine, to be a teacher, actually to be a physics teacher. I switched to math because that was the right fit at the time, and got my bachelor's and master's degrees in math education, computer science minor. Decided to stay and get a music bachelor's and directed bands for 3 years before I got into IT. That seems like an odd way around, but as Steve Jobs said in that one famous commencement address, that you can connect the dots going backwards. Some of the solutions that I had in IT, I realized it was a much more creative field than I ever thought. It's not just technical, but the creative problem solving. I felt that the math and the music degrees were, no pun intended, instrumental in some of the solutions that I came up with. In reflecting on some of these things, as I'm authoring a book in math education right now, the most important class I ever had was geometry. And it's not because of the triangles and the lines and the planes. It was because of the multi-step problems of, I'm given this, I've got to get here, and I go step by step to get there. And they have to be logical steps. That is every IT project I've worked on for 30 years, identifying the problem, figuring out how you can take logical steps to get there. So that has been a revelation that geometry was actually the most important class I ever had. And luckily, when I identified this issue with basic multiplication facts, and I don't want to say it was too late for them because we actually did lessons in practice, but an understanding, where did they go wrong? What was the root cause analysis? And how could I then positively affect that in potentially future generations by creating something that meets them where they are? What met me where I was Sesame Street and Schoolhouse Rock back in the day. That met me because we had 3 channels and we were captive audience Saturday mornings and after school. And that's what I was exposed to. These days, there's other media that can meet them where they are. And when I put all that together, some of the solutions that I've been working on lately.
You know, Chris, I'm excited to jump into more of this story. We're going to go through 4 elemental segments here. Earth, air, water, and fire. But before we jump into them, I also just wanted to take a minute and say welcome to the Elemental Educator Podcast. It's my pleasure to host you here today.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on so I can help get the word out. Whenever you're offering a free service for students and teachers, I've got to help get the word out. I appreciate you helping me do that.
And we'll do that by jumping into our first segment of Grounded Moments.
3, 2, 1.
We call this our first segment because everything majestic requires deep roots, and we want to look at the soil out of which your philosophy grew. When we asked you for a quote that keeps you grounded, you didn't look to a tech CEO or an ancient philosopher. You took us back to your 9th grade algebra class, and you asked your teacher about something you hadn't mastered yet, and he looked at you and said, "You just have to learn to ask yourself the right questions." When you look back at that 14-year-old version of yourself, why did those words mean so much to you in the moment, and why have you held on to them until now?
I've even written articles on LinkedIn about that moment and about that the statement he made. At the time, I don't remember the exact lesson we were on, but as I developed, it came to the point where you raise your hand in class and a teacher walks over. What is the teacher doing? He's actually asking a series of questions to you. He's not going over there and saying, here's the answer. He's saying, okay, what is this? You say it's an expression. He's saying, is there, let's say factoring, because that was an earlier reference, is there a greatest common factor? Is it a difference of squares? Is it a perfect square trinomial? Is it other, and that progression, which is a normal progression, once you learn those questions, I didn't need the teacher anymore, for example. And it turns out that one of the reasons I've had success with the tech solutions that I've had is because I'm asking the right questions up front. And I'll go through the list. I'll be thorough. When I'm listening to someone, I know the technical implication, and I may say, what you just said has this technical implication. There's a subtlety to that. Let me dig into that a little bit. And it might be that they really meant other words. And so that interrogation and asking the right questions is something I've done my entire career in technology. When I was a band director, something's out of tune. Okay, where is that? And it's helps you drill down to, okay, it's this note on this instrument, but you have to ask the right questions. Is it brass or woodwind? Is it, up or low? And that process has been key to my success. And I remember sitting there, and the moment in ninth grade, Mr. Lawrence was right here on my right. I can picture it. It was that impactful. And so that's something I refer to, and it has carried me since.
Asking the right questions is exactly what a programmer does when writing clean code, and it's exactly what a musician does when tuning an instrument. You mastered both. You wrote a book for musicians called How to Make First Chair, and you've now built What Times What. To the untrained eye, math and music seem like opposite sides of the universe, the analytical versus the artistic. But you argue that the link is undeniable. Teach me something here. What is the common thread between a kid trying to make first chair in a Texas brass section and a kid trying to top the leaderboard on What Times What? How does mastering that rigid, fundamentals unlock true creative or analytical freedom in both?
Well, in music, you'll have scales. You'll have other fundamentals that you have that you develop. You practice these. That's not your performance. That's not the audition, although sometimes you play scales for audition. But there are fundamentals. There's a work ethic. There is a incremental improvement, incremental progress to get to the goal. When you're talking about an audition, you have to set it as a priority and have the work ethic. As Cristiano Ronaldo will tell you, talent without work is nothing. And it's the same as you're striving to be a good musician or one that does well at an audition. And if you want to do well in mathematics, you also have to have fundamentals. It becomes a universal in sports as well. You've got to have the fundamentals. In math as well, you have to have fundamentals. Now, I see the what times what as a fundamental to factoring algebra, to solving that, to even getting a common denominator with fractions. It helps you to be able to break those numbers down. Sure, there's always a system and a long way of doing it, but hopefully at some point you develop some sense where that becomes natural, where whether it's math and it becomes natural but because you've had this fluency, the same thing with music. You have developed this fluency and you can sight read or you can play this music because you have those fundamentals. And so that is something that there are many, by the way, but that is probably the first one. And I actually filmed a DVD for How to Make First Chair, and I took questions from the book and asked someone that adjudicates, someone that teaches, so different professional musicians, and asked them a series of questions. But one chapter in that DVD that I emphasized was fundamentals, and that is what times what is helping or aims to help students get comfortable with the fundamental of just multiplication, because division is defined in terms of multiplication. Factoring, I don't want them to hit a wall because of this skill that they can master.
It's well said. And, I want to take it a new direction here and jump into a game and go a little bit deeper here. We're going to play principle or preference. So I'm going to read you 10 statements, tailored directly to your career, your design choices, your philosophy that you're speaking about here. And for each one, you just have to tell me if it's a principle, an absolute non-negotiable truth that you'll never compromise on, or if it's a preference and how, you like things done, but there's some room for negotiation there. Okay?
Thank you. Sure.
No passes, no it depends, no time for context. Let's jump into principle or preference here. Okay. A student choosing to skip recess to play an educational math game is always acceptable.
Preference.
Structuring an educational technology tool as a 501c3 nonprofit instead of a venture-backed startup is always the right move.
It's my preference.
Requiring students to say the answer out loud via speech recognition rather than typing it on a keyboard is an acceptable accommodation.
Preference. You have some
Using
good gray
competition.
areas here, but it could go
I'm
either
trying
way.
to
And
catch you on one.
I could see context in both, but I'll say this because these are the things that I preferred. So go ahead.
Yeah. Using competition and public leaderboards to motivate elementary school learners is never okay.
Preference.
Prioritizing strict multiplication automaticity over conceptual exploration in early elementary grades is essential.
That's a preference too, Tyler.
The belief that math anxiety is entirely a structural creation, not an inherent trait, is a 100% fact.
I think that's a principle.
There we go. We've got our first principle. Minimizing the disruption of a teacher's daily routine when introducing a new tool is essential for flawless implementation.
That fits another philosophy that I have. I'll say principle on that.
Investing immense time and energy into running for public office, even when the funding odds are heavily stacked against you, is still okay.
It is still okay. Principle.
I agree with that. Keeping an educational tool 100% free for users rather than using a freemium subscription model is always the right way.
That's what I believe. I'll go principle.
And evaluating school successes based on empirical technical metrics over culture intuition is the only way we should be measuring metrics in a school.
That's preference. Absolutely. That's preference.
So there were some that
It's
were
not
like a
what I
quick.
prefer. Yeah.
There were some quick jumps, like that last one is an obvious preference, I think, for anybody in education. But there were some that you hesitated on. So take me back to some of these contexts that you wanted to provide early on.
It's tough to say in absolutes, and I understand both sides of the equation. And if the question's an absolute, maybe it's the the don't answer a true false absolute with true usually, and I think that's what it is because I understand the other side of the argument. And in context, it might be right for a student that needs that for some reason. And so, because there are so many students and so many backgrounds that they may have, it's tough to say absolute this or that and the other. I might say 99% of the time, but that's not absolute. And so I would go preference instead. But I might lean towards one or the other as my plan A. But it's always important for a teacher, a coach, anyone to have many tools in their toolbox and be able to understand that this student needs this tool at this time, or a different tool, or this student, and be able to meet them where they are with those different strategies. And so probably some of those things hit me when you said that, and I've got to allow for the exception.
Yeah. And in your past work, you talk about emphasizing that technical user experience, saying numbers out loud, saying answers out loud. Why is the physical act of vocalizing a number so critical to breaking down a psychological wall?
Well, other than it being fun, and that's the feedback that I've gotten from the students, it also engages more parts of the brain and allows them to make broader and, I believe, deeper connections versus just tapping something on a screen. Now you've got to see, hear, process, and then do something physically. We've removed some of the handwritten pencil work, which I think is important for those same cognitive developments with the physical act. I can't put a piece of paper and a pencil in front of everybody. I can put this in front of everyone and allow them to vocalize. In some of the pedagogical areas of the app, which are very important to me, and as I develop the what plus what for even the younger, there are going to be more development. There's different ways that students may they may gravitate to certain ways of thinking about addition. And I want to include all of them as hints. And if one of them takes, then they may gravitate towards that one on each of those lessons. If one of them takes, great, that's a win. But I want to provide different ways that you can look at, you can see online, there's many different ways. I want to see, can I gamify any of those so that they're just develop these things quickly. And so those pedagogical moments are very important to me. So even in the level up section, when there's hints, instead of just looking at material, I have them tapping to at least increment in the repeated addition. And so that's yet another sense, engaging part of their brain where instead of just looking, oh, it's repeated addition. No, they're physically adding seven each time. And I think I can't replicate being right there next to them with a pencil, but I can try to engage more and more. They tap to make a jump on the number line, the 7, 14, 21. Actually engage them. That's in the practice area where it's not spoken and it's not timed, but it's, I think, essential to reinforce what the teacher might be saying, because a teacher is going to choose what they need for their class, and if any one of these things reinforce, that's important. In my band directing life, you would sometimes bring in a guest to work the band, especially before contests, and they would say the exact same things that you were saying, and for some reason the student heard that, and it was always a bit funny and frustrating that I've said the exact same thing every day for 3 months, but one person says it and they believe it and gravitate towards that. So in these hints, if I can pedagogically reinforce anything that's being said in the classroom, I will be happy, and hopefully that the kids will gravitate towards that and get something out of that and learn. That's really the bottom line.
And it's clear from hearing you talk, Chris, that there's a deep passion, there's a deep value in doing what you do. And you shared something with me in the intake form that I want to get into, but it's a good segue for it if we get into our next element, the air element. So we'll jump into headwinds and tailwinds. So you wrote something that I want to bring up from the intake form. You said that I believed from an early age that my best course of escape was through education, and used math as a part of that escape. It's pretty heavy words to use, that word escape. And so take me back to this early age. I think we're thinking like that 4 to 15. I'm not sure what range it was there, but what was going on that we were escaping from, and how did math actually assist in that?
I had a good self-reflection probably 3 years ago before running for school board, just understanding what were my motivations then and now. But at an early age, I was around adults as an only child, and fortunate, and I mean that word very intentionally. I was fortunate that the adults around me worked with me, that they would hold up, even if it was fingers. It didn't have to be flashcards. How many is this? And there's an audio recording of me when I was 2, and you can hear me say 2. You can't hear the other words that I'm saying, but you can hear my numbers very clearly. I think I was counting to 100 when I was 2. I think Schoolhouse Rock and Sesame Street, that engaged me in learning, was fun. So when I walked into kindergarten, I knew my multiples of 5 because I watched them, every Saturday morning with the cartoons. And there was a point where there was a step-parent introduced into the family when I was probably 4 or 5. I think I had a foundation before that. But there were some negative things that you brought into the family. Substance abuse was brought in as if it were, normal. If there were any videos of that, CPS or the Child Protective Services would have been there without question. When I got to 9th grade algebra and I was doing some homework, I realized, because Mom hadn't had algebra, he hadn't had algebra, that I was going to have to do this on my own. That was, I almost remember the moment in the scene where I was when I had that revelation, and my escape out of that situation, which it wasn't one that I wanted to emulate. It was one I wanted to learn from and not do. But it seemed, and I guess it was that I had some sort of presence about me at that age, that education would be the way out of that situation to the escape. I set a nice goal of I would want to have everything that I turn in be 95 or above. It turned out that setting a real achievable goal like that was enough to be valedictorian. I got scholarships and mission accomplished. I was able to get out of there and then do other things, and math has carried me through all of it. I'll even say through the music as well, but 30-year IT career, as I mentioned, geometry being something that helps me think through multi-step problems. I think that's the critical skill. Last year when I was teaching, I had told the geometry teacher that was the most important class, and I think he was even shocked that that my perspective on that long of IT career is that it was about thinking through a multi-step problem, that I think it was impactful for him to understand where I was coming from, and that I was so appreciative. And again, it wasn't about the triangles, it was about the thought process. And as I'm writing this book about math education in the age of AI, is especially when AI can do so many computations quickly, what is math education about? It's about thinking. It's not about the computation, it's about the thinking. And so I had the early skills, addition, multiplication, all that I didn't have to have guidance at home. I had the fundamentals, back to that carried me through the rest of it. And as you know, math is an incremental type of subject, and I had a solid foundation, and that carried me through. And here I am after this long a career and stuff, circling back to what maybe my original true love was, and trying to help other folks have that positive relationship with math. My wife didn't have the most positive relationship with math. There are others, and maybe if you go back and have them with what times what or what plus what, have a positive relationship, you build on that relationship just like you build on the fundamentals itself. Even after one little practice session that they go through, they can get a badge, and it's a cute little badge. Well, that is a visual representation that might give them confidence. Oh, I can do this. And there's other things that they can achieve. Sometimes it's within their own 30-second against their personal best. Sometimes it is head-to-head. But I think back to the second grader that I was learning my times tables, and as we would learn them, we would get a sticker on a poster board that we were able to do our 2s and our 3s and stuff like that. That's what these badges are. They're a visual indication of your success. Success should bring confidence. Confidence, a good relationship. That is also similar to what I did in how to make first chair whenever you're doing metronome overlearning, and I have a worksheet where you fill in a dot whenever you do a perfect run, and then you do another one. And over time, you have a visual representation of your success, and ideally, that builds confidence in a good relationship. And so whenever it comes crunch time, you can perform, because confidence is a part of that formula.
The one thing that I appreciate here is, from your early childhood to what you're trying to instill now, there's a purpose of setting a goal to it. And so when faced with the adversity, whether it's the step figure that's introduced into your life, or the math equation, or even trying to get accepted into a school, setting a simple goal gives you something to start working towards. And if you don't have a goal, you're working towards nothing. And so hearing your stories and as you talk, there was all these micro goals that were set to help you overcome that adversity along the way. And you mentioned it a little bit, that you also decided to run for that Dallas ISD school board. You had, the context from your form as well, is you had 2% of the funding compared to the rest of your opponents, but you still captured 22% of the vote in a 3-person race. And you did this because you wanted to give voters an educator instead of a lawyer. They chose the lawyer, but when You poured your heart into that race to serve your community, and the system chose a different path. How did you handle that specific type of rejection?
Well, I had started that race because I believe voters should have a choice versus an uncontested incumbent. Just on the principle of voting, give them a choice. I believe the last couple of elections, Dallas has 9 districts, and this is I'm up in the North Dallas one, District 1, and it had not been contested. And I was like, I see that as service, that role as service, and I was willing to do that for the 3-year term service. Yes, it would be a massive time commitment. Yes, it would probably be exhausting, and I would have to juggle on everything. But I have a passion for education, and said I will take on that probably just one term. I don't have any other political aspirations. I don't have backdoor contracts that might be associated with some things. I don't have big money contributors, which I see as a positive. Others might not. Others might see, oh, we have these endorsements or these contributions. I was purely about the education, just like I am with the app or anything else that I did, that it is genuine desire to help educate. And so I was running on principle, and it was a 3-person race, 2 lawyers and myself. And I figured, yes, with 2% of the funds getting to 22% in that 3-person race was a bit overperforming. I was proud that I gave it my all. A little confession, I have some introverted tendencies. And so when we had, panels and stuff like that, I was exhausted afterwards. Even doing interviews and podcasts, I might feel, anxiety or something about, but my passion is greater than that. And so losing, I felt that the principle of offering an educator as a candidate, mission accomplished. I did what I set out to do. I learned a lot. I did a lot of introspection about why I was so passionate about education, a little bit of my own personal story, and that I used education to escape. And guess what? There are students in Dallas, big place and very diverse, that might be in that same boat, that need education to get out of their situation. And that was where I was coming from, still passionate about it. And then it sort of bled over into walking the talk or walking the walk and teaching a year. And that was a big decision. And it seems to be making sense now in the context of what I realized and what my new mission is.
Sticking with the theme of navigating some headwinds, some adversity, we're going to play flip the script. So I'm going to give you 5 commonly accepted narratives, cliches, cynical perspectives from the modern education or tech sector. And you can either accept it because it's a harsh reality, or flip it into something better, maybe what the truth should be. Make sense?
Give it a shot.
All right. So the first one here is, by the time a student reaches the 10th grade without basic math fluency, it's too late to fix the foundation, and you have to focus purely on calculators and accommodation.
It's reality, because there are tests that are driving things. But I still did flip and try to work in and gave them an opportunity to do some basic multiplication facts for a grade, because I had the support of the administration that said, do what you need to do. And so I did flip it, and it's what you said is reality, but I did also work in some fundamentals. So I tried to flip it.
And I think it's a reality because of the timeline of school. There's some exceptions where there is a pressure to graduate within 3 years. And, the reality is some might need 4 or 5. because you have to continue to build that foundation. And so I'm a big fan too of also flipping that and saying it'll take as long as it needs to take for them to get there. But that being said, the reality too is we try to fast track everybody and put them through the same time frame, and that's where we run into a lot of issues in education. Next one here.
Follow up on that just a little bit.
Yeah.
I hate that calculator is used as a crutch when you get to that point. Yes.
Yeah.
You can actually get Desmos to help you factoring, to help you factor, or you can get Desmos to help you do this and that and the other. But it always seemed like a crutch instead of maybe because it was too late. But that's a frustrating cycle to just keep offering the crutch instead of fixing that. And you're right. The timeline, we don't have time to go back and do that. The fundamentals. You can't go back to second grade and do all the way up. And so I think that's exactly why I went on this mission to get down there, help the kids have a positive relationship, a positive experience, and build on that. And that won't really be seen but until those third or fourth or fifth graders get into ninth grade. We'll see the result. But let's go back and start that process and hopefully move the needle.
Yeah. Next one here for you is kids today have zero attention span because of social media. And you cannot expect them to engage with core academic fundamentals without flashing lights and constant dopamine hits.
I will say you've got some great questions. And I'd like to flip that and not paint with such a broad stroke. That condition exists, absolutely, way more than it should. There are some students that have had maybe better guidance as far as that goes, or more restrictions. It's something we absolutely need to address, and I believe that eliminating phones in schools was maybe a small part of it. Because there's a large equation. The devices that are given to all of them, that also needs to stop. I think Sweden and some other folks are leading, and let's back off of that so that we are using actual books and paper and pencil. Of course, if you're writing in pencil, it might take longer to grade, and that's something I think we need to accept, but you can't have some LLM, ChatGPT or stuff, write it for you and cheat if you're doing it with your hand and with your pencil. There is one thing that I learned that while I was teaching, you have dyslexia training. And I'm sitting there very confused because they're talking about phonics and they're talking about handwriting as some therapeutic things. And I was like, when did this stuff disappear? And is there a chicken and an egg? Did it disappear and now we're seeing it? Or was it therapy back then preventing it or helping address it along the way? And so even though I have been in technology and I have a technology solution here, we need to limit that and only use it when it is a tool for learning. And that's why I've tried to keep that in mind as well. There's some irony there. I don't think there should be Chromebooks in class, but at the same time, I'm creating a tool that if they do, I want it to be a good learning tool. So I may have gone on a tangent with that one, accept or flip it. So let me get out of the way and let you.
No, that was a good one. I'll give you one more here. The systemic gaps in public education are entirely financial. And if we double the funding to underperforming districts, the achievement gap will resolve themselves.
I don't accept that. And I'm glad that I've had the last couple of years to think about this. The socioeconomic disparity is real. And it's not just throwing money at the schools. It's our parents trying to make a living so much that they haven't had time or the resources to give their young children experiences. Once I started looking at some of the standardized tests and they're referencing things that are taken for granted as normal, there's a big world out there. There's a lot of experiences out there. There's a lot of folks that haven't been exposed to a baseball game or even the sport of baseball whenever it seems like it's such a common thing. But that is your perspective. There is a bigger world. There are bigger experiences out there, are a lot diverse. And, money just doesn't solve that, So no, I don't accept that. That's a question that if it was easy to solve, it'd be solved. But I think it's more than just that. Now, I'm not against that. I'm just saying that's not the whole solution.
No, I'm not against anybody getting more money. That all sounds great. You flipped all of them, which brings about a lot of change. And so I think it just naturally is a good way to jump into that water element. So we'll get into the third segment here of Ripples of Change. So, Chris, your original vision for What Times What wasn't just to build an app that sat on an iPad. Your vision was to make multiplication fluency more popular than spelling bees. You've literally built a live multiplication bee, even directly into the software, so schools can host high-energy tournament nights. Paint this picture for me. Describe the sights, the sounds, the emotional energy of the school community holding a live multiplication bee, and maybe tell us a bit about what this What Times What is at this point.
I'm so excited about this. It's something easy for me to talk about, and I can't say that about everything, but about this I can. When I was sitting in that class last year, it was a planning period, and I'm thinking the root cause of their problems is that they have little to no multiplication fluency. I said, okay, this needs to be, as you said, this needs to be more popular than spelling bees. How do you make it cool? How do you make it neat, fun, and exciting? Spelling bees, I think, are even on ESPN now. They've made it fun and exciting, and there's, they got the sponsorship and TV time and all that. And so there's no real mechanism for that I'm aware of. I loved the flashcards when I was young. I could do them before you even stopped the card. I knew what it was. And so I said, okay, I'm also a developer. Let me go see if I can find a solution in the browser where it'll show something. You speak it, it might be red or green, and go to the next one, and it would keep track of if it's right or wrong. And at the end, you can see how many or how fast and stuff. So I tried it. I tried it a year ago. And not to be overly technical, but you can have it listen, calculate, and respond to every single card. That wasn't fast enough for me. And so I put it away. I was like, okay, well, this is frustrating. It's a good idea, neat idea. I don't know if I think the kids would like that versus the analog flashcards, especially if you want to go as fast as you can go. And I'd put it away a few months, then I'd open it back up and I'd try a different way and maybe a different technology stack, different things. And then, honestly, the last month or two, I'm always most creative between the time I wake up and the time I get up. I don't know what it is about that time, but when I'm laying there, things come to me, and I thought, why don't I try a different approach instead of synchronous, asynchronous? Let me do all the speech, and then at the end, try that. And that was the revelation. And the way I do it on the back end, I'm able to interpret English. I'm able to do Spanish as well. And that, I think, if you're truly trying to help as many students as possible, you make it accessible. Accessible means you just go to a website. You don't have to have an app store subscription, because that might be completely normal to most folks. It's not everybody. There's a big diverse world out there, and you can't take even that for granted. So this is just a website, and it works right in the browser. But the idea, in addition to like a daily puzzle that's like Wordle, that's the same for everybody for the world, and you can share, and there's a neat graphic just like Wordle that goes with that. The kids said they wanted to compete as well. The little pilot that I did before school was out, they wanted to earn badges. They wanted to compete. It's like, great. I must be like a little kid because I do too. And built where a teacher in a classroom can set up a round robin tournament where everyone plays everyone. They can set up a bracket tournament if they want to. But the multiplication bee is there now. And what is to me very cool, there's a lightning round in the spelling bee that I saw. I think it helps, tiebreaker or something, and it is fast and it is exciting. But what we have with what takes the human element out of it, it's as fast as they can go. Mm-hmm. And in there, anybody that signs up, any teacher, any parent, anyone can establish a classroom. They can then create a multiplication bee, invite or have students or adults sign up for it. And I've got a leaderboard. Click it, and you can project a leaderboard. And as they go through it, and like a spelling bee, they go up to one central station in front of everyone. They'll start their round. That same screen could be projected behind them. So the audience can see what they're doing, and they can also see the leaderboard. And as soon as they're done, it calculates, and it shows on the leaderboard. And they go through a round. And whoever sets up the multiplication bee then says, okay, at the end, I'm going to cut the bottom 10%, or I'm going to cut the bottom 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. And then there's another round. And it's just like anything. And I've even built in where the order is kind of Olympic order, where it'll go from lowest to highest. That builds a little drama. If someone got 20 and someone got 10, then the next round, the 10, they could jump up, but it builds a little drama. And at the end, there's a round where if you wanted to, it's configurable. Instead of 30 seconds, maybe they're really neck and neck, you can have it 15. And man, there's no room for error. But yeah, the leaderboard's automated, the rounds are automated, the eliminations are automated, and there could be an audience if an elementary school has a math night or a STEM night or something like that. Instead of just some static projects, what if they had a live event? I want to live in that world where there's some kids that are excited about multiplication, that it is a big deal, that they go to the site and they realize that there's badges to earn, and they can build their rating, actually like chess. When you play someone that's has a higher rating than you, your rating goes up, and there's different things built in, the head-to-head challenges, whether they're trying to go against the clock and get their own personal record or go against their friend, or in these tournaments, that if they see that it's a big deal to someone, and that someone's me, and that all this really, I hope, professional level stuff is built in, maybe they'll be motivated to spend some time with it, or be motivated to try it, or to learn and to get more fluent. But that's the world I want to live in. And so I decided, because I've got the technical ability, to build it. And now my job is to evangelize that. And that is exactly why I appreciate you having me on, as help me evangelize this.
So I've got it up on the screen here. Can you see it on your end?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so those that are watching the audio version, head over to YouTube and make sure you check out the video version of this. I've got my screen shared here to whattimeswhat.com. And, as we go through it, the see it, say it, score it here, everything that we talked about, the daily challenge, the gauntlet, the level up, the multiplication bee, sections for teachers here on grade books. You can click over to a leaderboard tab and right away, you see some scores here, right on. Here we go. Okay. Well, what I want to know is, let's play. Can we play one?
Go for it. If the microphone's not captured on the podcast and allows you to do it there, go for it.
Well, I think I can capture it both. I'm going to try. See if I can try it in both spaces. Allow this time. Can you still hear me on the podcast?
I can. This is looking good. We'll find
so
out
let's
together.
and you're gonna play with me, right? We'll see who's faster. We'll just shout them out as they come up.
Okay.
Yeah, I might have to edit your voice out so that it sounds like I'm winning, because we'll see.
Okay.
Let's see how this goes.
Sure.
90. Do I have to hit next after I say it?
You do have to tip next. That's how
okay.
6. 100. Not 45.
9. 12. 1. 40. 18. 8. 77. 60.
96.
92. No, 96.
16.
I got it wrong. 16.
15.
6. 4.
32.
32.
64.
64. 9.
12. 36.
36.
48.
Oh my gosh. That was stressful. Yeah, he had even got the one that I got wrong and knew it. So,
but you may want to try to better your score.
Yeah.
And you may want to challenge school-age children. And I think that parents can do that.
Right? I could beat them.
Well, either way, it's positive.
Yeah.
Either way, it's positive, because they might try to beat you, or they might try to continue to beat you. This is a positive competition that I want parents to challenge their third or fourth graders in that. And either way, win or lose, it's good. It might be like the parent in the driveway playing basketball. At some point, the young one will overtake the older one, and that's a moment. Let it be a moment. There are competitions in math that are advanced. Whenever you have to do double-digit multiplication in your head, or base conversion in your head, this is accessible, and so that's important.
It's cool. I just looked at the bottom here. So it transcribed everything that we did as well. And so even though here I couldn't see, like it says that I got 8 times 12 wrong, which we know is 96, but I said 92. In the transcript, it shows 92, no 96. I got it wrong. So that's cool. And I'm assuming if I push this, I'm just going to give it a try. Right on. It gives us an audio playback of it, which I think is very cool. Right. So you can even then go back and hear yourself to it. This is very neat. This is very awesome. I'm so glad that this is out there.
Thank you. The commissioner has the commissioner of the spelling bee, or the multiplication bee, excuse me, has the ability to override some things if something goes wrong, because I realize that some things aren't perfect, and maybe someone made a big loud noise or something and it didn't pick up in the room. I've got to allow for a margin of error that they can correct it. And so I've tried to build some of those realistic things so they could actually have a competition. And I'm excited to do that. I know I'm a band geek, and I'm a math nerd and a computer nerd, and I own it, and I'm happy that I'm the one to bring this, because I am still at this age, I'm 57, excited about multiplication.
I love it. I think that's great. For those listening, you saw, I got 20. So what I'm going to do is we'll put what times what as a link in the description here. It'll be the very first thing before we even write the description. Click that link, do your what times what. You only get to do it once though, just like we did. And then you have to tell me if you beat 20. So I just want to know if anybody beat my score, which I don't think is actually possible, because what you guys didn't see when I closed it, it said you got the fastest time out of anybody that's ever done it. So it didn't say that. I'm just making stuff up.
Interesting. If you look at the leaderboard, and I'll just say that records were made to be broken, but I will feature whoever can beat my record, because right now I know this the sample size is smaller, and
now I gotta go back to
a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Right now, I am the world champion. I'm the world's fastest multiplication, if you use that as the guide, because I'm hitting 38 and 39 in 30 seconds pretty regularly, if I want to. And I would love for someone to knock me off that mountain. That is a positive thing. Like, bring it. Like, that is some serious fluency. But you control that, and you knowing that you've got a tap is crucial. You might have lost, several because of that one thing. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But you can try that gauntlet and get better.
I didn't realize I had to click next, so it took away probably 40 of my answers.
Yes,
but
I'm sure at least.
yeah, at least 40. But yeah, even looking at it, this is cool. This is awesome. It's something that I'll even bring into my building and show the kids and show my staff, because what a cool little thing. And with it, we're obviously trying to build something behind it a little bit bigger than just simply the game itself. So I think we need to jump into our last segment. And so we'll get into the fire element of spark or burn. Hey, if you're enjoying today's episode, make sure you leave a rating and review on Apple and Spotify. It helps the show reach more people. Let's get back to it. So we enter our final course segment, fire. And fire is the element of high stakes, intense passion, risk, sacrifice, and the defining moments where we choose to burn down the old way of doing things to spark something entirely new. Chris, I want to hear from you. Why, what times what? What is the goal with what we're doing here?
I hope that more young children have a positive relationship with math. I believe you can build on a positive relationship with math, because the opposite, we know where that goes. When they have an aversion to math, that's a bad thing. Then the door's hard to open at that point. If that gives them a positive experience and a positive relationship with math, I think there are more doors that will open to them in not just math class, but of the future, but in career paths or career choices. If they just have a good positive relationship with math, and if we accomplish that, if we move the needle, then mission accomplished.
And, to find your absolute core of your conviction, we're going to play a final game. Final answer, actually, is the name of the game. It's an elimination tournament of words. I'm going to give you 2 words at a time, and you just have to choose the one that is more essential to your identity, what we're trying to do, your mission, your beliefs. The winner advances to the next round until we have a final word that outlasts them all, okay?
Okay.
So let's start with logic or harmony.
Logic.
Logic or fluency.
Let's say logic.
Logic or structure.
I'm going to stick with logic.
Logic or sanctuary.
My counselor wife would say sanctuary. I'm going to stick with logic.
Logic or freedom.
That's a big word. I'll pivot to freedom.
I think we'll stay on freedom here, but I'll give you a bigger word than freedom here. Freedom or valedictorian.
Valedictorian is within a sample size, so I will stick with freedom.
Freedom or teacher.
When running for school board, I did get the endorsement of the teacher union, and it was very emotional for me. I felt like those were my people, and they heard and saw me, and I'll go to teacher.
Teacher or inertia.
Teacher.
Teacher or legacy.
Legacy's good. Give me teacher.
And teacher or escape.
Teacher is a means to escape. I need the teacher.
And, your final answer here is the word teacher. You gave us a little story about the endorsement of the teachers union and what it meant to you, and to have teachers supporting you as you ran. This reveals a lot about who you are, Chris, and what it means to you. When you look back at the landscape of education right now, What is one thing happening in our systems that makes you completely lose your temper? Something you want to see burn down entirely so that we can build something better over the ashes of it?
It's going to be an ironic answer, but a recent school bond election had a chunk for giving more devices in the school. And I'm a very large proponent of real textbooks with real paper, real pencils. And so even though I have a technology solution, I think it should be, there should be balance in many things, and this is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I believe some of the old school ways are cognitively better. The comprehension is better. And if we're not focused on those things, I think we're lost. That's important. I don't care if something's can be efficiently graded, this and that and the other. If it's not the best for the students, our priorities are wrong. And so even though I have a website that helps, I believe it is just a tool, that it should be in balance of things that are with pencil and paper.
On the Elemental Educator podcast, every guest leaves a piece of themselves behind for the next traveler on the show. They don't know who they are, what we're going to talk about, what they bring to the table. The question left for you, Chris, from my last guest, is in a world full of marching bands, how do you ensure that you still dance to your own drum?
And the person didn't know that I was coming. And I've been a soloist in a marching band before, high school and college. And so it is possible to simultaneously do both. You surrender at times to the ensemble. And then there are times where it is your time to shine or beat to your own drum. One other note that I was leader on the field as drum major my 11th grade year. And I looked around at, we had success my 10th grade year. And 11th grade year, we actually took a step back. I reflected on that and realized that I was a better leader on the field versus in front of the band, and didn't even try out the next year, which odds are that I would have been able to repeat and all. But you have to give up. I thought it was a mature decision at the time to give up the spotlight for the ensemble and organization. I still think about that. That I don't want to call it sacrifice. I was selfish. I wanted to succeed, and I thought it was better if I was leading on the field instead of in front. And it played out like that, because the next year we achieved what we were trying to do, and so that was something in a leadership sense that I'm proud that I had the maturity at 16 to do that. No regrets. But in a world of marching bands, it's good to support that, and you have your opportunity to shine. So that's it.
And Chris, before we wrap everything up here, what is a question you want to lock in for the next guest on the show, not knowing who they are, what they're going to bring to it?
In leadership and in leadership roles, you might lead something in the corporate world, you might lead something in the educational world. The question is, how do you improve an organization the fastest? I've had my own experiences, and I'll be looking forward to seeing someone's experience on that if they've thought about. It's a bit philosophical. It's actually a bit mathematical because of the answer that I have, and I will be subscribed, and I will be tuning in to hear that answer.
I can't wait to get it to them as well. And Chris, we started this conversation talking about a 15-year-old boy who used mathematics as an escape plan from an abusive home. And today, you're handing the exact same escape plan out to thousands of children across the country entirely for free, providing that no matter where the math surfaces in students' future, there will be less anxiety, more joy, and unlocked doors if a positive relationship with the fundamentals is built at an early age. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for your engineering. And thank you for being an exceptional guest on the show. It's been my pleasure to host you.
Thank you, Tyler. Appreciate you very much.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of the show. If you have feedback, a suggestion, or just want to start a conversation, fire off an email to tyler@elementaleducator.com. I actually read them. And if this episode sparks something, leave a review on Apple or Spotify. It helps more leaders find the show. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, where I put out additional content. I'll see you next time, same place.